Okay, so I'm going to read to you Chapter 1 of California Blue. And this is pretty easy Lexile level. That is, most people are able to read it with no issue, but the topics are pretty heavy. And so it's not something that I would have like a fifth or a sixth grader read, but it's highly accessible as far as it's not difficult to actually read. So this is Chapter 1. I don't know. Sorry, let me try that again. Chapter 1. I don't know why running through a redwood forest has always made me think of death. It's not because I grew up in a mill town. I don't run between the trees seeing 500-foot tall piles of sawdust or neatly stacked lumber or endless reams of paper. And it's not because of the darkness where the old growth is the thickest, although as I pounded along the narrow forest trail, the massive trees pressed in against each other in the twilight, and the smell of the wood and the leaves was damp and lightly sweet and faintly blood-like. I was well into the heart of the old growth now, with great tree trunks rising around me like massive pillars of a giant cathedral. High overhead, the forest ceiling was vaulted with dark branches and latticed with leaves that blotted out the purple light of the sinking sun. I fell into my 6-minute mile pace. This is a comfortable rhythm for me, a little faster than I jog and a little slower than team practice laps. I can lose myself in a 6-minute mile pace and just keep pumping with my arms and legs, while my mind floats free to ponder the large and small mysteries of the universe. In a redwood forest, the mysteries are mostly large. I guess redwoods made me think of death because of their size and age. I'm used to thinking of myself as kind of important, and the trees give me a different perspective. Some of the great sequoias deep in the old growth were seedlings when Socrates drank hemlock and saplings when Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon. They grew to several hundred feet during the Dark Ages, and there they stand today, in exactly the same cool forest glade they've grown in for millennia, while human history has gone on in other corners of the globe. I've just turned 17 and running through a forest of 300-foot tall creatures, some of them more than 100 times older than I am, helps me remember that the human lifespan is a brief one. If we don't cut them all down, these trees will be growing in exactly the same spring-fed glade when my grandson's grandson is training for his high school track team or whatever guys will be doing in the 22nd century to earn varsity letters and impress girls. I like to run alone. It's best when there's a slight chill in the air. My favorite time to run is in the late afternoon when the clouds seem to swim toward sunset and the enormous shadows from the tree trunks thicken and begin to merge into a wall of darkness. Sometimes I run in my track team shorts and my t-shirt, pretending it's the county championship race and I'm out in front. The leaves rustle overhead and I make believe it's applause and pick up the pace. John, John, John. I fly into a full sprint and the bird calls become whistles from the crowd and the narrow forest trails turn into a cinder track with a ribbon stretched across the far distance for the winner. Sometimes I carry a pack on my back with a collapsible rod and some flies and stop at Thompson's Creek for a little fishing. You can catch trout up to about 15 inches long in the pools beneath the falls. I used to bring them home and clean them and eat them, but now I catch them and let them go. Sometimes I take my net. On this particular Wednesday, I had my racket with me in a small collecting jar. I also had a very real reason for thinking about death as I started the slight uphill stretch that would take me past Thompson's Creek to the hole in the fence by Hylick Lane. It had been about a rough 48 hours, and I can't tell you how good it felt to fall into my 6-minute mile rhythm and lose myself on the forest trail. It's okay to think about death when you're running through the forest alone at twilight. It's quite another thing to meet it face to face at your dinner table over a plate of grilled lamb chops. 2 days ago, almost as soon as we sat down to dinner, I could tell that something was very wrong. There was a tension in the room that I couldn't quite identify, but it floated just above the table, as palpable as the aroma of mashed potatoes and grilled lamb and green beans. My mother was talking too much, and my father wasn't saying anything at all. Usually it's the other way around. Dad questions me in annoying detail about how school went and how my training's going. My mother, on the other hand, prefers to listen. I've seen her at family gatherings go from hour to hour, from conversation to conversation, listening and smiling and obviously enjoying herself, but never saying a single word. We're at the top of page 4. 2 nights ago, she couldn't keep quiet. I hope I didn't burn the lamb. I know you both like it a little pink, but I'm afraid it's not cooked through. I cut off a sliver to see, and it looked okay, but I don't want either of you getting sick. She stopped abruptly, picked up her water glass, and took a couple of quick sips. Tastes like you always make it, I told her. Well, the price is so high, she said, continuing a thought she hadn't started. It's really something of a luxury, but I know how much you both like lamb chops, so once in a while we deserve a treat. She took another quick sip of water and plunged right on. I saw a homeless family in front of the supermarket today. The man held a sign saying he was willing to work for food, and the woman held a baby. I wanted to give them $1, but all I could spare was some change. I felt so sorry for them. I wonder where they sleep. I hope the baby has enough to eat. It made me feel guilty buying so many things, but it also made me worry because if it could happen to them, it could happen to anyone. They look like decent people who had just had some bad breaks. I don't know what we'll do if prices keep rising this way. Is something wrong? I asked her. Are we suddenly poor? I don't get it. She took a quick forkful of mashed potatoes. The lines in her face deepened as she chewed and swallowed, and suddenly she veered off once again in a totally new direction. I ran into Miss Merrill at the supermarket. She said the prom's going to be at the high school this year. She said it's because they're short of money, but I think it's a nice change. Mom's voice dropped to a whisper, but she kept talking so quickly that her sentences almost ran together. I never liked the idea of having the prom in a hotel. It was at the school gym for years. The gym was good enough for us. When they decorate it with balloons and crepe paper, it looks nice. I hope you're going to ask someone, John. Miss Merrill says a lot of juniors are going. I'm sure there are plenty of girls who would like to go with you. Sure, I mumbled, hundreds. But she wasn't even listening to me. She was looking at my father in a very peculiar way. Do you remember our prom, Henry? I was looking at the pictures the other day. I still remember most of the songs they played. You were so handsome. When you came to pick me up, I think that was the first time I ever saw you in a suit and tie. In 17 years of eating dinner at this table, I had never seen my mother talk so much. I couldn't figure it out. Suddenly, she put her fork down and picked up a napkin. She lifted up to her face as if to dab her lips, and it took me a minute to realize she was crying. My father put a gentle hand on her shoulder. Meg, he said, don't. It was halfway between a request and a command. She nodded, but she couldn't stop. I'm sorry, she said. She stood from the table. Please keep eating. I'm sorry. Excuse me for a minute. Please finish the lamb and take seconds. Don't if it's too pink, but if it's not, eat as much as you want. Excuse me. Mom, what's wrong? Nothing, she said, and ran out of the dining room. There was a long, strange silence. I looked at my father. He went on eating, sawing off pieces of lamb and dipping them in mashed potatoes and gravy and then popping them in his mouth. He didn't look at me until I said, Did you and Mom have a fight? Nope. Well, something's wrong. Aren't you going to go see what it is? I'm going to finish my dinner. He popped another piece of grilled lamb in his mouth, chewed and swallowed. I stood up. I'm going to go see what's wrong with her. Nothing's wrong with your mother. She just ran out of here crying. Don't you think something must be wrong with her? With me. What? Not with her, with me. You know what this is all about? Sit back down. Once again, it was halfway between a request and a command. I sat. What's going on? Dad looked up from his plate. We studied each other in silence for a long minute, and we never got along very well. Everybody says he's a perfect father, so I guess that must be my fault. Almost since I can remember, every time he's tried to push me one way, I've gone the other direction. I can't say why. All my brothers and sisters turned out exactly the way he wanted, and they all seem to be leading perfect lives. I got 2 older sisters who were cheerleaders, 2 older brothers who were high school football stars. All 4 of them finished high school, got married, found jobs, and are very happy. I'm the youngest by almost 5 years. I think I must have been a mistake. They had 4 wonderful kids and they didn't plan on having more. Then my mom got pregnant with me and they decided, oh, what the heck, why not? I guess they wish they had quit at 4. My dad still holds the record for most yards gained by a Kiowa high school football player. There's a plaque in the trophy case in school that lists all the major school records, and his name is at the very top. Henry Arthur Rogers, 2111 yards, 1954 to 57. It's kind of intimidating to think how many strong and fleet kids before and since have taken their best shot and fallen short of Henry Arthur Rogers. I didn't even try. During the football season, I run cross country. During basketball season, I run indoor track. And of course, during baseball season, when my father thinks I should be digging hard ground balls out of the dirt and sliding headfirst into home, I run track. Now, his heavily muscled arms were on the table, a fork in his left hand, and his right, a loosely folded fist near his spoon. What is it? I asked him. Bad news. Tell me something I don't know. He smiled. His face looked like a sculptor carved a bust of perfect, hardworking American man for some sort of blue-collar Hall of Fame. He's got a cleft chin, a small mouth, high cheekbones, and intense black eyes. His hair is thinning a bit near the temples. A few white hairs can be seen the dark tangle on top. I don't think he's ever had an inch of paunch all through the middle age. Dad looks like He could still gain 100 yards in a high school football game if you dressed him up in pads and handed him the football. Now, watching me carefully, he lowered his fork. 30%, he said. What are you talking about? That's why your mother's crying. 30%. Of what? I went for some tests. Haven't been feeling so good lately. Got the results today. My father didn't look away and change his tone in the slightest. Doctor says I've got 30% chance. Of what? His right fist flattened on the tabletop. The silence was so deep that I could hear my mother sobbing softly in the kitchen. Of what? Tell me. Leukemia. The word seemed unnatural on his lips, and he replaced it quickly with some shorter ones. Cancer of the blood. The doctor gave me a 30% chance. That's why your mother's so upset. It's only going to get rougher around here before it gets better, so I think the best thing we could do is learn to finish our dinners. It felt like a sledgehammer had just swung down on the center of my forehead. This is the top of page 9. I sat there waiting for the world to take on some kind of normal focus again. My mother came back in the room, drying her eyes, and we looked at each other. Then, as if on cue, we both looked at my father, who went back to eating his lamb, slowly and deliberately, each bite exactly the same size as the ones before it. The dinner scene of 2 days before receded as I swerved to avoid a fallen branch in the middle of the forest trail. I'd been so lost deep in my 6-mile-a-minute pace, so it was a bit of a shock to reemerge suddenly in the sweet gloom of the redwood forest. I knew I must be nearing the creek, so I picked up my pace just a little and sped down the gentle slope. You can hear Thompson's Creek about 100 feet before you see it. The gossiping of the leaves with the breeze takes on an urgency till you feel there must be a new presence on the forest, whispering new and different secrets. Then, as you get real close, you can make out the splash of the waterfall scattering silver current between sharp rocks. At its widest point, 20 feet apart in places, it's less than 10. There's a log bridge a little farther upstream, but everyone I know picks their way across the stepping stones, occasionally slipping and dipping their feet in the water. I slowed to an easy jog and then to a walk, stopped near the side of the creek. I could see my reflection clearly in the gently rippling mirror. To tell the truth, I had never liked the way I look very much, even reflected in a creek bed. I'm tall and thin. I guess gawky is the right word. My sandy brown hair is uncombable and sticks out in all angles and directions, like a roofing thatch. I hate my nose. It's sharp and small like a beak, and it gives people a bad first impression of me. It makes me look serious and mean. All the other males in my family are friendly looking and very handsome. Can't imagine how my genes got so screwed up. Kneeling and reaching down with both hands, I scooped up some water and I splashed on my face. The spring that feeds Thompson's Creek originates high in the glaciers of the Sierra, and all year round the water's ice cold. My cheeks and chin tingle as the freezing water dripped back in the creek and fractured my reflection. Above the center of the creek, the tree cover parted and dusky light sails down the falls and flooded the forest floor. I pick up my way across the stone to the far bank and cut through the dense underbrush. Prickly-toothed sow thistles nipped at my legs. I spotted a few yellow hawkbit flowers and a giant patch of western azaleas already in full bloom. Flitting above the azaleas, I was amazed to see what looked like a mustard white, playfully zigzagging back and forth and up and down on the evening breeze. Mustard whites are a lot more common in the Cascades and mountains of British Columbia than in Northern California. But there, the little sucker was above the azaleas, and there I was, a few feet away with my net and collecting jar. I held the net ready in my right hand, stepped a little closer. It was a mustard white, beyond any doubt. I could see the wings clearly, and there were no dark spots on the upper sides. It wasn't the first one I'd ever seen in this forest, but it was the first one I had ever tried to catch. I swiped and missed. The butterfly rose up about 10 feet from the ground and leisurely headed north. I cut through dense underbrush, following, waiting for another chance. The going was tough. The chase was a welcome respite from my worries about what was waiting for me at home. Twice I jumped and swiped at the butterfly. Twice it eluded me. It flew on and I ran beneath it. We were having a nice little game. That mustard white was winning. Finally, it came down about 15 feet ahead of me. Recklessly, I charged forward, my net raised. I was paying so much attention to the butterfly, I didn't see the ground fall away sudden in a 10-foot drop disguised by branches and bushes. I sprinted right off the edge of the drop, waved my net futilely at the mustard white, which hovered just beyond my reach, and then I plummeted. A bush cushioned my landing, but even so, the impact knocked me senseless. When my mind was cleared, I sat up and I took stock. My arms and legs didn't seem to be broken. Some small branches had cut my face a little. My hands and wrists were scratched up, but all in all, it had been lucky landing. There was no sign of the mustard weight. I got to my feet and glanced down at the buckeye bush that broke my fall. I had nearly flattened it. If plants can think, this one must have been cursing its luck. As I glanced down, rubbing myself off, I saw the chrysalis at the top of page 12. At first, I didn't recognize it as a chrysalis. I saw peculiar white streaks on the leaf and pulled away. They looked kind of like bird droppings, and I was afraid it might have rubbed against them and gotten my clothes dirty. Then I looked closer and realized they were chrysalises, not just one, but at least half a dozen. The white streaks that resembled bird droppings were clearly natural camouflage. It's not unusual for butterfly chrysalises to use camouflage or have other elaborate ways of hiding. Many moths go through the pupal stage underground, but almost all butterflies go through their metamorphosis above ground, within reach of all the sorts of predators and particularly hungry birds. So butterfly chrysalises have evolved fascinating ways to avoid being eaten. Some species, such as the Adonis blue, hide in a leaf litter on the forest floor. Eriba ringlet pupae are encased in protective silk cocoons. Many species chrysalises have shapes and colors that resemble leaves and twigs. There's even a kind of butterfly called the green hairstreak, whose chrysalises make threatening sounds when they're disturbed. I've heard of caterpillars with markings that look like bird droppings, but never a chrysalis. I gently snapped off a twig with one of the curious inch-long pupae and put it in my collecting jar. Seemed like a poor replacement for the mustard white I had missed, but you never know exactly what kind of butterfly will emerge. It was growing dark quickly. I had chased the mustard white nearly a half a mile into the undergrowth and had very little idea where I was. Getting lost in a forest at night is not fun at all, so I set off quickly in what I thought must be the right direction. Luckily, the fall hadn't done any serious damage, and I was able to make pretty good time. Soon I heard the gurgle of the creek and the steady wash-wash of the falls, and I knew it was going to be okay. Of course, I'd be a little late for dinner, as my father had predicted, things seemed to be getting rougher and rougher at my home. Coming home late and missing some of the strange silences didn't seem like a totally bad idea. I turned onto the path that leads to Hylick Lane and began to jog. Okay, so that is the end of chapter 1.